Hi, everybody. It's Carol. I'm at the beach this week, so that's great. But I don't have my cheat sheet because I don't have a printer, so I'm going to be looking back and forth at handwritten notes, and so may be a little bit not as organized, so sorry about that. First of all, we were supposed to give something positive, I think, from one of the articles about the flipped classroom, and I probably the best thing for me was just getting the definition, which I probably should have looked up a long time ago. But the term flipped classroom had been mentioned in several of our other classes, and I wasn't really sure what it was, so I was glad to get the definition from the Newton article. And I also enjoyed particularly the article by Michael Horn called Transformation Potential of the Flipped Classroom. The thing that I liked from that article that excited me the most, so this would be my answer to number one, was the idea that he said that the passive time in the classroom, which is the lecturing and the note taking, is turned into active time. And I thought that is really great because I think that as a teacher, I often felt like I prepared a lot for class and then I spoon fed it to kids, and I didn't really often feel like they bought into it. And I think one thing that we've learned from all of our online teaching courses is active learning is better learning. They are more engaged and they have more ownership. And so I think that that just is just another indication by having students more engaged in the classroom, having an active class period, that that's going to probably provide better learning as well. So that was exciting to me, and I thought that that would be great. I also thought that as a teacher, it would provide me the opportunity to help students when they're actually learning something as opposed to just repeating something that I've said that maybe they didn't catch. And really when they're doing the homework is when they need help, or when they're trying to understand, grappling with something. That's when you're really doing the best teaching, not when you're just giving them information. So I liked that part of it. That was very exciting to me. The concern also came from the Horn article, and that was that because the flipped classroom, they say, is based on the idea of educational technology, or providing students with lectures via an online lecture, a screencast, or a podcast, or something like that, that it's necessary for students to have access to technology. And I felt like it might be creating a situation where it's not always available to maybe a lower income student. In fact, that's exactly what he had pointed out. And I feel like there's enough divide in access to education that we don't really want to have that situation any more than we already have it. So to me, that was sort of a concern. But he also pointed out, sort of argued with himself on this issue, that most schools do have computer labs, and in situations, say in lower socioeconomic areas where parents might both be working and not available to help students with homework, or where there aren't computers in the home, that at least then a teacher would be available to provide that help in the classroom. So from that standpoint, it sort of flips back to being helpful and being a good idea. But he did say that it was less prevalent in those types of classrooms in those districts. So that would be a concern to me. I do know that in our town, which is very poor, we live in a very poor southern town. I think that even now our middle schools and our high schools do distribute computers and iPads to the kids. So it may that I didn't notice the date that that article was written, so it may be that that's sort of something that's not as much of an issue. The Vanderbilt article also said that you can kind of do the flipped classroom old school, and that's really, I think, sort of what we literature teachers often would do, in that we would assign a story or a novel, and we'd say, you read this before you come to class. And then I would always say, be prepared for a have you read it quiz. And that would be the very first thing when they would walk in. They'd have a quiz, maybe of 5 or 10 questions, and it would basically be over some plot points, or maybe some of the characterization, or something that I felt like would be fairly readily remembered if they had read the story, but just to check to see that they'd read the story. But then I became what Newton called the sage on the stage, and I would lecture and guide discussion, but I did not break them into groups, which I think was a big part of what the flipped classroom was also, that there was that peer instruction. And so I think that that is brings me to my third part of the questions. I'm doing this from my head. So the third one was, I think, what is the most um, challenging thing maybe to a teacher? What would you have to learn, or what would you apply? And I think that the hardest thing probably will be the technology skill that teachers would need to flip classrooms. Even though they seem to occur more in face-to-face and brick and mortar schools, I think that the technology piece of it is important, that you would put your lecture that you would ordinarily do, or that you would before have done, on a whiteboard with your off-the-cuff remarks, your off-the-cuff lecture that you've done over and over again. You'd necessarily create a PowerPoint and then make a screencast-o-matic presentation, or you do a podcast. And so, for someone who's taught for a while, then of course that would create some work for you. It also sometimes, when you're doing just a lecture in a classroom, you can kind of tell from talking whether or not kids are picking up on what you're saying, or students are picking up on what you're saying. And of course, you don't get that from doing a screencast. And so you would really have to be intentional in making that screencast. And so I think that would also take some thinking. I also think that you would, in the classroom, then you would start to employ some other platforms or some applications that maybe that say I hadn't done in the past. So let's use my example of my ninth grade literature classroom. So I've assigned them a story, and I do, before they come in, I might give them a PowerPoint lecture on literary terms and have them look for those things. So characterization, setting, plot, just some basic things. And then when they come into the classroom, I want them to do this "Have you read it?" quiz. And so I would try and do that peer instruction thing that they talk about in the Vanderbilt article. And so I think what I would do is I would probably try and use this tool that was in our last week's presentation tools called Pear Deck. And it pairs with Google products. And so that makes it sort of a seamless thing. And so you create a quiz in Pear Deck, and from the quiz it gives you a code. And so you've imported your class roster into Pear Deck, and when students come in, they get on their iPads and they're invited to join the quiz. And as the teacher, you can lock their responses once they've made it. You can project the quiz on a screen so that everyone can see the quiz and everyone can see all the responses that are up there. So it gives you that peer interaction. Billy can see what Susie answered, Susie can see what Johnny answered, everybody can see what everybody answered, but it's anonymous. They don't know who answered what. So they're getting everybody's feedback in the class. And then as the teacher, I get to see what everybody answered, who got it, who didn't. And then the Pear Deck will also give me the data at the end of the day, the end of the period, to let me know for just-in-time teaching, or for that differentiated instruction, what maybe I need to go over. If maybe I asked a question, for instance, on irony, and nobody in the class got irony right, then obviously that's something that has got more nuance than, say, the term plot. Everybody got plot. They know what it means to have an action in a story, but irony has more nuance to it, and they need more instruction. So then I know that I need to go over that in class face to face with everybody. So I just think that that is going to be something that maybe teachers that are coming right out of school, that would be something they would do seamlessly. Maybe they're those digital natives, but for those of us who are learning this now, then that's going to be more of a challenge. So anyway, I talked longer than I intended to, so I will be anxious to hear what you had to say, and see if any of you have done this. Maybe some of you have done this in some of the training things you've done. So hope y'all are having a good week, and I will see you in the forums.